So here are, as it was laid out at the National Conservatives, as it is in J.D. Vance's mind, and as it is by the people who espouse what Viktor Orban in Hungary espouses, the various things which make up the new right. Trump has not only chosen the most articulate and credible possible advocate of his sensibilities, but laid the groundwork for the permanent restructuring not only of American conservatism, but of America itself. Because Trump chose J.D. Vance, Trumpism will long outlast its founder. Trump resisted the pleas of media mogul Rupert Murdoch to choose someone tamer and more controllable as his running mate, and in so doing, passed the torch to a fighting tribune of the new MAGA generation. Now, Rod Dreher is an American writer, religious man, converted. His most recent conversion was to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, who now lives and writes in Budapest, subsidized by the Hungarian government of Viktor Orban. This is not an uncommon pilgrimage these days. There are quite a few people who now do this exact thing. The Hungarian government puts a significant amount of money into paying for people from other countries to essentially promulgate the viewpoint which the Orban government has come to and its party represents, and which also kind of represents a growing faction of the right, which I would now call the new right rather than the far right. I mean, we can discuss the most appropriate nomenclature, but the new right. Now, when you heard J.D. Vance talking about childless cat ladies with no stake in the future, you may not also know that he's also advocated in the past that childless people's votes should be worth less than people with children. He said that what happens is that people with children should get a weighted vote in elections because they have a greater stake in the future. This wasn't just a kind of J.D. Vance thing, was evidenced when the governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, introduced Trump at a town hall, what they call a town hall in America, in Flint, Michigan, when Sanders said her 3 children serve as a permanent reminder of everything that is at stake in this country. And then she said, my kids keep me humble. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble. In other words, this is not some kind of accidental positing of what would seem to many people to be an eccentric view, but it's actually part of a fully fledged ideology, which I would call, and other people have also called, a new right ideology, which we in this country have been barely aware of. Now, I was very innocent about this until I attended a conference of the National Conservatives in London a year and a half ago. It's an international outfit funded mostly in America, run by an extremely right-wing Israeli, and backed also by the Hungarian government. In fact, so much so that the press officer for the entire event, when he saw me in the room where the stalls were, said, he said, don't worry, he said, there won't be too much Hungarian in this event. I hadn't mentioned it. He already knew essentially what the problematic is. And this was a 3-day event with loads and loads of speakers on various topics. Suella Braverman was there, Jacob Rees-Mogg was there, Lord Frost was there, but all those big figures from the Conservative Party were espousing essentially, in addition to no to migration, no to wokeness, they were all in favour of the unfettered free market. In other words, you should low taxes and so on. And they must have wondered why it was they weren't getting a fantastic reception there. And that's essentially because the new right is not the same as the old right ideologically. They've managed to miss the true ideological direction of the event. It's quite funny, actually, sometimes, watching a politician who thinks they're in front of one set of people gradually becoming aware that they're in front of another set of people. It's something that actually all speakers dread. I might slightly be dreading it now. One of the things that happened during the course of that conference was a speech by Dreher himself, the guy who wrote this encomium to J.D. Vance, which was read for him by the Vicar of Salcombe, who included in his own address a talk he claimed to give to parents christening their children at his church. He said this was a talk they often gave. And it included in this talk he gave them about how terrible things were, references to children being allowed to identify as cats in schools. This is an entire urban myth. Which has been put around, but nevertheless, it was a kind of and this was in the kind of religious part of the discussion. So it gives you some kind of idea of how the demonology of this particular group of people works. And there was, in addition to all those, a video link to J.D. Vance before he was chosen as vice president, talking about his kind of politics. Now, as recently as 2012, if you were talking about what would be happening on the right wing of the Republican Party, say, you'd be talking about the Tea Party. Do you remember the Tea Party? The Tea Party's prime goal was the small state, low tax, the total triumph of individualism. It was, if you like, kind of economic ultra-liberalism, if more authoritarian culturally. Abortion was not a big part, for example, of what the Tea Party saw as being what they wanted to do. And those were the people who were supposed to have captured the Republican Party at that point and were going to be the wave of the future. There's always been another, if you like, kind of super Reaganism going well beyond Reagan. There was another politician at the same time as Reagan, a chap called Pat Buchanan, who was himself briefly a candidate for the presidency. He ran as a Republican nominee and he didn't get it, who wrote over the years a series of books which became more and more important if you consider what the new right currently is. So here are, as it was laid out at the National Conservatives, as it is in J.D. Vance's mind, and as it is by the people who espouse what Viktor Orban in Hungary espouses, the various things which make up the new right and which distinguish it from what you might call the old right. The first one is religion. There was a full religious segment in the National Conservatives conference. It was actually easily the most bizarre session of all, and there were some bizarre sessions there, but this was the most bizarre session. It was the one where Dreher spoke and the Vicar of Salcombe gave his opinions about people for identifying as cats. I have to say, if I was having my child christened in Salcombe and the vicar started going on about people identifying as cats and the dreadful nature of society, I might have wondered if I'd come in through the wrong door. But nevertheless, it was actually quite a significant part. This particular urban myth was mentioned no less than 4 times by different people during the course of including someone actually who was here, Catherine Burblesing mentioned it actually, which I think was not particularly characteristic of hers. But the first one is religion. The idea that religious values and practice should shape politics. It's quite important in a particular kind of Catholicism in particular, not just Catholicism, but it is. It's called integralism. And it's the idea that you can't actually separate your religious values from your political values. And that actually in a society, in Western societies, our values are gained from Christianity. And therefore the primacy of Christian values, however they want to express them, should actually be represented in the politics of the country. In that sense, it fits very badly with the tradition of secularism or whatever else it claims. So that's one, which is unique.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.